Inflation Today for June 21st, 2021. This is the second in a series of hyperinflation stories, different stories and relics and things from the past of people who have lived through hyperinflations. First, we start in Argentina in the present day. Hello, I'm writing to you from Argentina. I'm 30 years old, and since I was born, we have been with hyperinflation. Here, the salary each year is worth 30 or 40% less, and when the salaries rise, it is still not reaching because in relation to inflation, it's still a negative percentage. At first, you stop doing certain things like going out to dinner or going to the movies. Then you see better the prices of the clothes to buy, so you economize on clothing. Until you get to the point where you just want to be able to pay for your services and buy food for your family, and without realizing it, you went from being a worker to being a survivor. Next story is from Venezuela in around 2010. This is another post by Caracas Girl. So Anonymous Austrian asks, what was life like in Venezuela before the hyperinflation hit? Caracas Girl responds, it brings me to tears just to think about this. Life was so easy, so simple. Everyone had money to invest, and we were growing our economy very good. We could afford vacations and goods without any problem. The thing that I miss most is going out with my parents to dine in street food places. It was cheap and the food was good. But there was a moment most places had to close down because they couldn't find food to prepare meals because of food shortages. Now there's more food available, but it's expensive. She also talks in another of her answers to a question that the farmers have begun to become very rich because price controls have been lifted on them for a time. Continuing on, I miss thinking about my plans in life and how much success I could have had pursuing my dream career in an economic environment where people had started to accumulate wealth. Actually, they had been accumulating wealth for quite some time. Venezuela was wealthy for some time. Now what we worry about is getting food and hoping the pain you may feel somewhere in your body is nothing serious, because if it was, paying for medicines would ruin most families. This is a passage from a book about the Song Dynasty, which is the earliest recorded hyperinflation that we've been able to find in the hyperinflation Discord. This was around 1100 AD. This is sort of just the description. We don't have too many personal stories from this time. But it's an interesting hyperinflation that I wanted to shoehorn in somewhere. I argue that because inflationary deficit finance allowed the song to obtain revenue regardless of the private sector's well-being, in a process analogous to the current resource curse, and to the aid curse, these policies weakened the natural symbiosis between public administration and the private sector. In effect, by papering over the short-term fiscal harm of economically destructive policies, fiat money creation allowed those policies to survive long enough to metastasize. So what this is describing is that over 1,000 years ago, or about 1,000 years ago, what was happening is that you had government that, because of their ability to print money, did not have the normal checks on bad government that they would normally have, that would push them out if they had started to behave badly. They didn't have those checks, so they continued to behave worse and worse and worse, and it eventually ended up destroying the Song Dynasty. So there's some interesting research that's been done on this very early hyperinflation, and people in the know actually compare this period to be more similar to today, even than Weimar Germany was. Some people say that. Okay, Finally, I have a chart. This isn't really a story either, but this is a chart of expenditures of a household in Germany, in Weimar Germany, during their hyperinflation. And this is something that I come back to again and again and again and again, because you can see how these prices begin. You're paying about 30% of your income on rent and 30% of your income on food. Just as you would today, 30% is considered an affordable rate for rent. But look what happens as the years go by, as these 10 years go by. Watch rent evaporate to almost nothing. 0.2%. Imagine paying 0.2% of your income on rent. This is why I say don't expect landlording to be a good profession going forward, because you are going to be subsidizing the people who are living in your dwellings. It's going to be very difficult to be a landlord and to have any sort of profit housing people during a time of hyperinflation, because you're the situation of a landlord, and they can do very well during fat times, during prosperous times. But during hard times, the government is going to squeeze everything they can, and being an owner of a house is a very bad situation, because you can't just pack up and leave. You're stuck there, and you are really at the mercy. But look, on the other hand, what happens to food. 91% of a person's income is going toward food. And that really is the end at that point, because if you're spending all your income on food, laws just don't matter anymore. The government just doesn't matter anymore, and the currency is over at that point, and something else must rise to take its place. So think about this chart when you are planning your strategy around housing and around food, and what you are going to prioritize if you believe that something like this could happen in the West.